It's small, it's light, and it's probably the most connected you'll ever feel to a piece of machinery. Whether you're obsessed with the pop-up headlights of the original or the modern curves of today, this is everything you need to know about the Mazda MX-5. Man, it is hard to overstate just how much the first-gen Miata completely changed the game when it debuted in 1989, and it single-handedly put an affordable roadster back on the map. Let's be honest, those pop-up headlights are what made everyone lose their minds. They weren't just a style choice, though. They actually used them to get around headlight height laws so they could keep that hood incredibly low. It gave the car that iconic face that's impossible not to love. And they even spent time tuning the exhaust note to make sure it sounded fun, instead of like a boring commuter car. Most convertibles back then were just coupes with the roofs hacked off, which made them floppy. But this was engineered from scratch as a roadster. And when you pair that with its four-wheel independent double wishbone suspension, the kind of tech you usually find on high-end supercars, you get a car that's actually connected to the road. If you look at the engines, the 90 to 93 models came with a 1.6-liter making 116 horsepower. Now, a 9.2-second 0 to 60 time won't win you any drag races. That engine was built to be revved out. It was all about momentum. But by 1994, the car had put on a little weight due to new safety stuff like the airbags, so they stepped things up with the 1.8-liter. That pushed it to 130 horses and added some much-needed torque. They also stiffened the chassis and started offering the Torsen limited slip differential on higher trims, which is a huge step up. Plus, Mazda was the absolute king of special editions, like the 91 British Racing Green, the super rare 92 Sunburst Yellow, or the 93 LE with that gorgeous red leather and BBS wheels. By the time the first-gen Miata wrapped up in '97, they'd sold over 400,000 units. It was such a massive success that it forced others to scramble and build the Boxster, Z3, and SLK. The Miata didn't just save the segment, it redefined it. So, after the massive success of the original, the second-gen Miata had some pretty huge shoes to fill. The biggest talking point was getting rid of the pop-up headlights. Between new pedestrian safety laws and the need for better aerodynamics, Mazda had to swap them for fixed lights. And it dropped the drag coefficient from 0.38 down to 0.36. Plus, the body also got a bit more muscular. With those flared fenders and curves, it kinda looked like a baby RX-7. When you're looking at these, you've really got to distinguish between the NB1 and the NB2. The NB1, which covered 99 and 2000, bumped that 1.8-liter engine up to 140 horses and introduced VICS, the Variable Inertia Charging System. It basically adjusts the intake runners to give you more torque throughout the rev range. Then the NB2 facelift came in 2001. You can tell those apart by the projector headlights and the more aggressive front bumper. Under the hood, they added SVT, variable valve timing, to smooth out the power delivery, and even the chassis got stiffer. But if we're talking about the absolute holy grail of the NB years, it's the 2004 and 2005 Mazda Speed MX-5. This was the only time Mazda ever gave us a factory turbo. They used an IHI turbocharger on the 1.8-liter to push out 178 horsepower, which dropped the 0 to 60 time to 6.7 seconds, making it the fastest factory Miata for a long time. It was the full package too. Bilstein shocks, 17-inch racing heart wheels, and a subtle aero kit. It definitely has an old-school turbo personality though. It's a bit temperamental, sure, but it's easily the most unique Miata ever built. Just curious, would you prefer the rev-happy 1.6-liter of the original or the extra punch of the 1.8-liter in these later models? By 2005, Mazda had hit a bit of a wall. The original Miata platform was basically tapped out, and new crash safety laws meant they couldn't just keep tweaking the same old architecture. Since building a new chassis from scratch is incredibly expensive, they got clever and borrowed the FE platform from the RX-8, shortening and modifying it to fit a roadster. Now, if you spend even 5 minutes on a car forum, you're going to see all the boat memes. Because it was physically larger, wider, taller, and a bit more puffy with those flared wheel arches. The soul of the car shifted under the hood too. They finally retired the old B-Series engine and gave us the 2-liter MZR. It was a modern aluminum block with a timing chain instead of a belt, pumping out 170 horses. To keep that signature 50-50 weight balance, they shoved the engine about 5 inches further back into the chassis. They also swapped the rear suspension to a multi-link setup from the RX-8. It was technically more sophisticated, but I'll be real with you. The early NC ones from 2006 to 2008 were tuned a little soft from the factory. Luckily, they tightened all of that up with the facelifts. When the NC2 facelift showed up in 2009, it brought that famous smiling grille, but the real upgrades were internal. It got forged engine components, which meant you could rev it higher and tune it harder without worrying about things going south. By the time the NC3 rolled around in 2013, they'd refined the throttle and brakes even further, and gave us the club trim, which looked super aggressive with the black mirrors and gunmetal wheels. It might be the big Miata, but it's honestly a lot more car than people give it credit for. We finally made it to the ND, which hit the streets in 2016. After all the boat jokes about the NC, they went on an absolute warpath to get the car back to its roots. And they actually pulled it off. It's shorter than the original '89 model and weighs just 2,300 pounds. It's over 150 pounds lighter than the NC. Design-wise, they ditched the happy face for a more aggressive look. And with those squinting LEDs, it doesn't look like a toy anymore. When it comes to what's under the hood, you've really got two eras, the ND1 and the ND2. The early ND1 had 155 horsepower, which sounds lower than the NC, but because the car was so light and had better low-end torque, it was actually faster, hitting 0 to 60 in about 6 seconds flat. The only real complaint was that it redlined at 6,800 RPM. But Mazda listened, and in 2019 they dropped the ND2. They lightened the pistons and rods, added a bigger throttle body, and bumped the power to 181 horses. More importantly, they raised the redline to 7,500 RPM. As for the drive, it made the jump to electric power steering. It's incredibly precise. But if you're coming from one of the older generations, you'll notice it doesn't talk to your hands quite as much as the old hydraulic racks did. Also, the stock suspension is famously soft. There's a lot of body roll, which Mazda says is intentional, so you can feel the weight transfer before the tires let go. And for the collectors, we just got the 35th anniversary edition for 2025. It is a total knockout in artisan red, that deep, moody, metallic color. They only sent about 300 of them to the US, so if you ever see one in the wild, you're looking at a total unicorn. Now that we've covered all 4 generations, which one do you think you'd actually want to park in your garage? The classic pop-up NA or the modern aggressive ND?